Excuse me, ma'am. Who are you?
Why, my name is Dorothy Gale, of course.
There's no way you're Dorothy. If you're Dorothy, why are you...
If I'm Dorothy, then why am I what?
Well, ma'am, why are you old and black?
Black I may be, but old I am not. I am 24.
But the last time I checked, Dorothy is a 14-year-old white girl who comes from Kansas. And sorry, ma'am, you do not look like a native Kansanean.
Well, obviously not. I'm from Brooklyn.
Yeah, we put that together eventually, after looking at you, ma'am.
Hello? What is that supposed to mean?
Greg, you're fired! And you got the wrong Dorothy! Ma'am, you're black. You can't be from Kansas. And you surely aren't the Dorothy we wanted for this interview.
I've already talked at length about how much the world of Oz has resonated with black audiences, specifically black women. But what I haven't talked about is what happened when we took the world of Oz into our own hands. Enter The Wiz. Much like the 1939 MGM original, The Wiz has entered into our own cultural lexicon, sort of like a founding fairy tale. It was only in 1975 where The Wiz premiered as a Broadway musical, having one of its first premieres in Baltimore, Maryland. The production was notable for its all-black cast and having an Afrocentric view of the world of Oz. When adapted into a film adaptation in 1978, there was a lot of changes. Dorothy, for one, was aged up, and the entire setting of the film was changed to have a more urban fantasy feel as we were transported into New York. Despite receiving mixed reviews in both the Broadway version as well as the film version, The Wiz as a franchise has stayed as a mainstay in black culture. When I was doing the research for this video, I was honestly shocked to find out that this movie was a box office failure, considering that it had the likes of Michael Jackson and Diana Ross. But in this section of this video, I'm honestly going to talk about why I love The Wiz, and so many people like me have fallen in love with this Afrocentric view of the world of Oz. So let's honestly start with the movie. It was directed by Sidney Lumet and written by Joel Schumacher. And like I said before, The Wiz, the 1978 version, took a lot of creative liberties in comparison to the MGM version and the original Broadway play. Like I said, Dorothy was aged up and we were placed into New York. Having Diana Ross play Dorothy caused a lot of critiques from everybody. People said that she couldn't act, which I believe wasn't true. Her emotional portrayal of Dorothy is something that I honestly really relate to, and many people said that she was too old to be playing Dorothy even though they aged her up to be 24, which is so wild considering in our year 2025 we cast young adults and even older adults to play teenagers all the time. I'm talking about you, Euphoria, but that is besides the point. A lot of people did not like this movie and were honestly nitpicking at it, if I'm being so real. One of the first ever showings of The Wiz was in Baltimore, Maryland, where I literally grew up, so I definitely watched The Wiz as a kid, and I just wanted to talk about how culturally impactful The Wiz is and continues to be. I wanted to get you on to specifically talk about how we see The Wiz throughout so many different versions of pop culture. What really shook me is when Kendrick sampled Wizard's "I'm a Phony" line for his diss track, right? Because as I was doing research for this video, I found out that many people thought The Wiz was a box office failure. And that shocked me because this is a cultural staple from my childhood.
Yeah.
I just couldn't believe it because there were a lot of themes that resonated, at least when I watched it the 5 times I did for this video, resonated with me. If it wasn't the crows that were bullying Michael Jackson's version of the Scarecrow, if it wasn't the way the lion had to put on this whole act of masculinity in order to feel like he felt in, if it wasn't the Emerald City with its hyper capitalist utopia, outside of the city was Evillene Sweatshop.
Right.
The commentary is still pertinent to this day.
Yeah. Another hip hop little brother, Flash and Flare, one of my favorite songs from them. And they sampled that. Ooh, ooh, ah.
Gotta have Flash and Flare. Flamboyant on y'all.
This is a little brother exclusive.
Nice, wonder, legacy. These rappers Babylon.
Like it's such a dope sample. It's one of my favorite samples of all time, in fact. Now you gotta make sure that gets in there because that's a dope.
I gotta Google it.
Yeah, you gotta Google it. Yeah, it's a dope sample. I've never heard anybody freak it like that. That particular sample for Flash and Flare. It definitely was like it was a staple. It's one of those movies where when there's like a black oeuvre, there's certain movies you can lose your black card over not having seen at a certain age. Like by the time you get to a certain age, there's like a list of maybe like 24 movies where you need to have seen them by the age of 25. You know, The Wiz is one of them, Coming to America, Color Purple, right? These are the first memes, is what it really comes down to. These are the first black memes where we speak in these sound bites, you know, slide some oil to me, you can't win. Just see a lot of that.
It's actually so concerning because tirrb always clowns me, but the first time I realized like who Michael Jackson was from the show Glee, but I grew up watching The Wiz. So I never
put two and two together.
Because I came from like a really conservative Christian household that believed that all these black celebrities were like demon worshippers.
Yeah.
So I was like, Michael Jackson was in The Wiz. Mine just empty. But I still understood like all of the messages that he was trying to say. And the more I learned about Michael Jackson, I was like, you're the realest alive. Why did my parents keep me from learning about you?
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, the Illuminati devil worshiping thing will not go away. Tenders came out on Easter, the movie, and I know they're gonna have the Illuminati black people have a field day with that.
Unlike the MGM version of The World of Oz, The Wiz begins with a multi-generational black family dinner, where our version of Dorothy, played by Diana Ross, is just overall being stressed out by her Aunt Em. Just like many black women her age, i.e. me and many of my friends, she is being pressured by her older counterpart to prioritize stability over passion. Aunt Em discourages Dorothy of keeping her dream of being a kindergarten teacher to be a high school teacher because her aunts believe that it will be more financially stable for her, as well as practically trying to force Dorothy to settle down with this random dude that she brought to this multi-generational family dinner. And as I am nearing the age that Diana Ross's Dorothy was at the start of The Wiz, I'm really starting to feel those similar pressures to conform that Dorothy felt as she was about to begin her journey into the world of Oz. Then comes a turning point. Toto, low-key being the main instigator of all of the problems in this movie, runs out while there is a huge winter storm, and being the good dog owner that Dorothy is, chases after Toto, which then transports her into the world of Oz. We later find out that it was Glinda, the good witch in this movie, that caused Dorothy to be swept off into this magical adventure, which is a complete shift that we see from the MGM version, where that version of Glinda doesn't have that much autonomy. This decision to give our version of Glinda more autonomy really reflects what we see in Afrofuturism. Dorothy just doesn't stumble into this fantasy, she was chosen for it. Once in Oz, Dorothy stumbles into what this movie is calling Munchkinland, and all of the Munchkins come from their urban wasteland after being trapped and cemented in the wall by the Wicked Witch of the East, evillene. They are cheering, they are celebrating, they are just thanking her for killing their oppressor. But Dorothy is like, I didn't kill anyone, I'm just a girl. This is where Miss One, the good witch of the North, comes in and practically gives Dorothy the lowdown practically in one of my favorite songs from the entire musical, which is The Wiz. She tells Dorothy that she killed evillene, she needs to take her slippers, and she needs to go down the yellow brick road in order to get back home. But most importantly, she needs the help of the wizard to do so. And so when everybody leaves and leaves Dorothy alone, she walks down the yellow brick road in her newly acquired silver shoes and makes her way down trying to get back home. During her journey, she meets a lot of different figures who teach her a lot about resilience as well as Afro-pessimism, but I'm gonna take it one character at a time. Also, during this whole journey, she and her entire crew are honestly trying to get a yellow cab to respond to them, but they are ignored. I found out that this is a thing that happens a lot to black people in New York. I live in Maryland, so I never had to hail a cab, but it's a thing that happens, and I'm sorry, I didn't know y'all were going through that. One of the first characters that she meets is the Scarecrow, played by Michael Jackson. When we first meet the Scarecrow, he is literally being held up and being accosted by these crows. These crows are an obvious allegory referred to Jim Crow laws, as they literally tell Michael Jackson's version of the Scarecrow that he needs to obey the Crow laws and belittle him for having the audacity for trying to be smart. Michael Jackson's version of the Scarecrow, as a response to all of this constant bullying and vitriol he faces, sings the song You Can't Win, which is a haunting portrayal of the futility of life as well as systematic oppression. Dorothy is just watching all of this and says, hell no, I'm not going to let these crows put a damper on this young man's love of learning, and shoos them off, liberating Michael Jackson's version of the Scarecrow. This is one of the first times that we see Dorothy having some type of bites back. Since the beginning of the movie with the multi-generational dinner, we saw Dorothy being so timid, but coming from the fact that we know her as a kindergarten teacher, having these Jim Crows, if you want to call them that, accost this young man for wanting to learn, Dorothy is not going for it. Dorothy has to practically give the Scarecrow a whole speech in order to tell him, yeah, there are factors that are trying to stop you from learning, but don't let people put you down. Learning is one of the greatest things that you can do in life. And with this speech, she practically invigorates the Scarecrow, and they, per usual, go down the yellow brick road in order to go see the Wiz. But the reason why I wanted you on the channel is that I want to talk about the Wiz and just how black of a movie it is. I spent I don't even know, like 1 hour plus talking about how black Wicked was, but we gotta go back to our roots, the one true black version of The Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, I think the Oz and the Wiz differ in their kind of analysis of systemic oppression, whereas Elphaba, Elphaba is kind of the fly in the milk experience, where it's like one black person as a token in a white conglomerate. Like you probably felt this. Probably the audiences felt this in like their workplaces and things like that, in schools or whatever. Whereas the Wiz is more so finding an experience of community in a capitalistic system. Oz is really focused on Elphaba, and Elphaba's sense of systemic oppression, highlighting specifically like black femme oppression, right? But when we move to the Wiz, the way you said the Wiz is the one true black movie, I get that. Because often when we look at oppression, it's obviously in a canvas of this Western society that we live in North America, right? And I think that there's a sincerity in dissecting the fly in the milk experience. But as I'm growing older, I kind of have the Wiz experience, where I'm trying to find the same black community or marginalized community of friends around me. The Wiz kind of mimics real life in terms of the ways in which characters embody extents of oppression, internalize it, and then I guess perform survival tactics in a capitalistic world. Yeah, Michael Jackson, his character and everything as a Scarecrow, he was just a very smart guy, right? He was just a nerd. But at the end of the day, like, him being a nerd in this environment just led him to get picked on. It reminds me a lot of like how Mike Tyson was like a pigeon farmer. The oppressive environment around him led him to get into like violence and things like that. It's a very communal experience sometimes, sadly. Michael Jackson was able to rid himself or liberate himself just with a change of friends, with a change of environment, because the thing that kept him there was the oppressive structure of his friends and what they were doing to get by, right? Not oppressive structure of his friends, but that inherent platonic
his friends were oppressing the hell out of him.
Yeah.
You don't gotta sugarcoat it.
Yeah. Sometimes your friends just like not really there for you. Sometimes they be chasing the bag at your expense, and that's a sad thing.
Eventually, as Dorothy and the Scarecrow make their way down the yellow brick road, we meet another founding character in the form of the Tin Man. When we meet the Tin Man, he is literally being crushed by gigantic statuettes that we later find out is his fourth wife called Teeny, who, just for your knowledge, looks like this. I have no idea what kind of message they want to convey by having this black man crushed by a gigantic minstrel-like caricature of a black woman. But let's get back into the plot. His ballad, What Could I Do If I Could Feel, is a lament about how a lot of black men feel of having to subdue their emotions. We later get to see this whole emotional suppression thing again with the lion, but let's focus on the Tin Man for now. As he's lamenting about what he would do if he could feel, the gang, which is now made of Dorothy and the Scarecrow, practically tell him that they're on to see the wizard and maybe he can give him a heart so he can start feeling again. As the crew make their way down the yellow brick road, they then run into their last and final member, which is going to be the lion. When they meet the lion, he is encrusted in a statue practically, and he breaks breaks out. All of this is happening at a bank, right? I don't know. Maybe they trying to say that bank loans be oppressing us. I don't even know. But as he breaks out from this statuette, right, he's putting on this gigantic performance that he's so big, tough, and masculine, scaring the entire gang except for my boy Toto. Toto's looking at him like, I don't know what this man doing, but walks up to him and literally causes the lion to start screaming like a little girl. It's actually so embarrassing. Dorothy has to tell him about himself and says, how dare you? How dare you scare us when you're just a big coward? I love Dorothy. I don't care what they say about Diana Ross for this movie. I thought she was great. But the lion practically talks about how for the longest he's never had courage. And as a lion, he is supposed to be the king of the jungle. Because he is the king of the jungle, he has to put on this whole performance even though that's not who he is. And I really feel like this is a more direct parallel to how our society forces black men to act. A lot of black men, when they were little boys, were told that they aren't supposed to cry, that they're either the man of the household or that boys don't cry, whatever the hell that means. All this toxic masculinity leads to a lot of black men being emotionally stunted as adults, and I really feel like we see this in the way the cowardly lion is portrayed. Despite all of this lamentation about how much his life sucks, Dorothy is able to coax him into joining the ragtag group in order to go beg the wizard to give him courage.
But then when we move towards people like the lion, because the lion, unlike the scarecrow, very much, it looks like he owned a property. It looks like he had all these.
He was literally in front of the bank.
Yeah,
Like.
yeah. He was flexing. Like he had this extensive privilege, but he had to learn how to exercise it and extend to community, right? And when he learned to break out of that box, open him up to other pathways of love. Love was opened up for him, right? And I feel like it's so weird because I could point to each one of those WizCast characters and I could be like, oh, this reminds me of my uncle. This reminds me of my sister. This reminds me of da-da-da-da. This reminds me of myself. We say there's a rise of DEI, but we always knew racism existed from the very beginning of the onset of movies, right? When we show a movie situated in a canvas of a black experience, there's inherently a double consciousness because living in a black body or a black life is inherently a very different experience on the onset, like ground up, right? So when they see this, they see the metaphors and analogies. A lot of the normative audience can't relate, and I feel like that's what got a lot of its downvotes.
As the crew make their way to the Emerald City, we get to see how much of a hyper-capitalist utopia that it is. The wizard literally controls everything. The city's constant obsessive reinvention of itself becomes a powerful metaphor for performative progress. Surface layer changes are celebrated, but the root of injustice is never actually addressed. Each time the wizard changes the city's dress code, the citizens anxiously rush to change so they can follow the new rules set by the wizard in order for them to maintain their place in this society. And this whole fashion transformation scene is a satirization of what actually happens in our real world. These real world companies distract us with all of these symbolic gestures like pride campaigns or these diversity and equity situations, but they never do the actual work in order to help these marginalized groups. Y'all remember during 2020 and the Black Lives Matter protests where we were actively asking cops to stop murdering us in our streets and for us to get systemic changes? Well, all that we got was that they fired that voice actor from Big Mouth and they got rid of Aunt Jemima. That's the stuff I'm talking about. One of the things that really stuck out to me when I was watching The Wiz is the Emerald City. So obviously, like I said, Dorothy is going through like Brooklyn trying to get back home. But when Dorothy got to the Emerald City, all I could think about was Atlanta. So we always talk about how black excellence, black faces in high places won't save us. And when I was watching the entire montage scene in the Emerald City, that's all I could think about. How these people are ignorant, right? I don't even know like the evil that is happening outside of the city, and they're so hell-bent on following the wizard's every whim. Like we see them all in green as I dressed up for this video, then yellow, then red, practically being so oblivious to everything that's happening because the munchkins in wherever Dorothy fell in first were literally being adhered to the wall, and there's literally a sweatshop 2 steps from their city where people are literally, they're being forced to work
because at the end of the day, the problem is still the environment environment, right?
Yeah.
Like the problem is still the structures that be, I guess, like filling the structures with B with similar faces is still gonna replicate of that oppression. It might feel a little bit better because like you're like, oh, there's a black person in this place. My black ass, my black Canadian ass saw Obama on the screen. My mom and dad were like cheering, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I was like 8 years old. I didn't really know why they were cheering. I really didn't know the significance, but I knew they were cheering. It's sad because black people deserve to have hope in a Baka society, but capitalist society in itself is built off the back of, you know, black bodies. While my mother and dad were cheering, at the same time they had 3 jobs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it's like you're cheering for this high face in a high place, but you're still being oppressed. 10 years later, now we're talking about our visas being revoked. We're talking about Southern Sudanese people being deported and things like that. Whereas like so much Southern Sudanese people like cheered when Obama was the high place in a high face. Well, at the end of the day, systemic oppression will do what systemic oppression does and doubles down.
By Dorothy and her friends doing everything that they were told to, being nice, enduring hardship, and being polite, they were still ignored by the citizens of the Emerald City. Unlike the average citizen that lives in the Emerald City, the gang of Dorothy and her friends were not able to adapt to the wizard's ever-changing trends. Therefore, the Emerald City becomes a cautionary tale of assimilation. Doing everything right within a corrupt system does not guarantee liberation. Just like how many marginalized people in our own society are told that if they act well, if they even vote, that they will have the same rights and liberties that the rest of us have, but then they are sadly met with exclusion. The only way Dorothy and her group of friends are able to be accepted by the people of Oz is when the camera that tracks everybody's assimilation scrolls down and sees that Dorothy is wearing evillene shoes with slippers that she got in the beginning of the movie. Due to this one fact, Dorothy and by association all of her friends become the apple of all of the Emerald City residents and get invited to see the wizard once and for all. Like you said, I really feel like the Wiz does a good job at showing like the dangers of capitalism, because we have the Emerald City where we see black people being able to practically enjoy the fruits of capitalism. But at the end of the day, they are literally being brainwashed by the phony that is the wizard. But then literally right outside of their gates, they have Evillene sweatshop. Like when I tell you, like my jaw dropped when Dorothy got sent on that mission to kill Evillene. They literally walked 2 steps down a little tunnel and it was Evillene sweatshop. It was such a good example in order for us, because I can only talk about Americans, how we as Americans, we literally benefit so much off the suffering of others. Like as I became more educated and I learned about all the stuff that's happening in Congo, how we consistently go destabilize all other governments in order for Americans to have the standard of living that we have, I was sick. And I really feel like having Evillene sweatshop right outside the Emerald City was like it was like right on the head.
A lot of Canadians don't want to admit it, but we live in extensive systemic oppression too. We don't understand how close oppression is to like on an everyday level. I can speak for Canada, I can't really speak for America. We live in a normalcy where our environment is situated by this lens of oppression that we decide is just a little bit better than America's. But the thing is, our gold trade is one of the best in the world, and who's being exploited for that? Sudan. Who's being politically destabilized for that right now? Sudan, right? Sales, like computer sales, things like that, and sales in the Congo. Who buys the most of that? Canada. Like who buys a lot of stocks in that? Canada. You know what I mean? So when we talk about the unseen black bodies, we don't got to go 2 steps down to America. We could look to our neighbors. We could look to the right. And that's the beauty of the Oz, right? The same things, the same product, same materials that all these people are making in those factories. We're fueling the city. We're a part of the city, and it was right there. You know what I mean? Here. If you look to your right, I guarantee you will see something made of cobalt in your room. Right there. Like that's the extent of child slavery. Anything in your computer, if you made a computer, if you bought a computer, that's Congo slavery right there. This Apple laptop. You know what I mean? We live in a very oppressive environment that belittles and basically fucks over exploitative colonies that we've since destabilized in Africa. And I think the Wiz's metaphor for that, although it's blatant and we talk about it all the time, you know, it's a common talking point. You know, it's a common talking point of capitalism of who makes your smartphones. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, the normalcy of living in an environment where we don't see suffering is very much instated from the very beginning of even things like prison, because, you know, they didn't want to do public lynchings anymore because everyone was being upset by it. Things like Emmett Till and stuff like that. You know, they didn't want news, so they just built these super mega prisons, and then it was out of sight, out of mind. All those black people are somewhere else, so you know, you don't hear about all their suffering. You don't hear the hundreds of thousands of prisoners crying every day, or like suffering every day, or in those, you know what I mean? The more out of sight, out of mind oppression is, the more this balance of liberalism develops. And Canada's kind of a very extreme version of that.
Wizard himself, initially depicted as this powerful mystical figure, eventually reveals himself to be a fraud. He manipulates the crew into believing that he is their only source of liberation, and later manipulates them into going to kill Evillene for him. This is a striking realization because as the crew leave to go kill Evillene, the entrance to her sweatshop is literally 2 steps from the doors of the Emerald City, going to show you that with all of his power and all of his influence, the wizard himself could have killed Evillene. But like I said in Act 1, he decides to get a little girl to do it for him. This moment echoes how, just like in America, our systems that uphold these structures expect those who are most oppressed by them to solve them. The wizard then serves as a false savior, a stand-in for politicians, corporations, and institutions that offer superficial solutions while not doing any of the real work. The wizard uses all of the tools at his fingertips to pacify the people of the Emerald City, so they never have time to really think about what is going on. The whole entirety of Oz is literally suffering under evil, and the wizard does nothing but tell these people to change their outfits. The people of Munchkinland were literally upheld and held in concrete for how long? Under evil mean. The wizard didn't do anything about that. Literally 2 steps from the Emerald City, there are people being forced to work in sweatshops. The wizard isn't doing anything about that, but the people inside the Emerald City are too busy trying to obey the whims of the wizard to really see that they are complicit in the oppression of all the people of Oz by doing nothing. As the gang make their way to Evillene, they are literally chased and eventually captured by these flying monkeys. This is where we finally get to meet our big bad evil antagonist that we have been talking about for the entirety of the movie, Evillene. When we first get to see Evillene, we get to see her for what she is, a grotesque depiction of capitalist exploitation. She is obviously running a sweatshop, and due to the fact that I said there's a lot of minstrelsy used in this movie, she looks like a walking caricature. When I was doing the research for this video, the 2 other versions that came before The Wiz also had her looking a hot, scary mess. It was only in later adaptations of The Wiz where they started to make her look like a normal person that was just evil, but literally in The Wiz she looks like a gross amalgamation of evil, no goodness. It's a mess. One of the details and overall themes I really want to talk about while you're here is definitely the topic of minstrelsy and the topic of colorism. No one talks about it because I've been looking all around and I'm just like, oh yeah, people love the Wiz, like what it means to be green, you know, black people. But as I'm watching this, I'm like, the amount of like minstrelsy and like mammification that I'm seeing in this movie is bonkers. So one thing that I definitely saw was in the MGM version, the Wicked Witch of the West is Aunt M. If you really look at her, you literally just notice that she's like a scary version of Aunt M to practically represent Dorothy's fears. Like almost all of the characters are just representative of people that Dorothy has met in her real world. So taking that logic and applying it to the Wiz, I had to look at Dorothy like, hey, I know your Aunt M in this version is a little annoying, wanting you to give up on your dreams of going and taking care of kids, but to take Aunt M.
Why are you making her look like this? Why does she look like this in your imagination?
I have to. You might think I'm doing the most, but I want you to look at the pictures that I'm putting on the screen right now.
It is something, you know, again, especially with these older adaptations of these black stories, that does not leave out room for a lot of these people's biases, especially the ones that don't age that well, to show up.
It's actually wild. You know, I had to keep watching this so I can make my analysis of this movie. But the amount of like minstrelsy in this was unacceptable. Let me pull out my notes. Let me pull out my notes because I had notes on this. Always noticed that Evillene looked a hot mess. A hot minstrel mess.
And that was intentional. But because me personally, I would have Evillene look, you know, even though her name is Evillene, I would make her look like a baddie, me personally.
Yes. Because, see, Hero, follow me. They knew they messed up in that Michael Jackson version because in every other iteration after that, I think there's like, they snuck a little craziness afterwards. But in every other iteration, she does look like a baddie. I think they got Mary J. Blige, but they had to look and they had to, they knew they couldn't continue the minstrelsy. It looked crazy.
No. I feel like definitely. Especially because someone like Mary J. Like, no, she's not gonna walk out looking, no.
I would have had a protest.
Yeah, no. I think she would have had a protest at that point.
Guy says she is a grotesque embodiment of capitalist exploitation. She literally runs a sweatshop where she literally bullies and whips her workers while forcing them to A, never take any breaks, and 2, wear these grotesque looking sweatshop costumes. Is actually such a mess. Her character is cartoonishly evil, barking orders while being surrounded by little fire and brimstone while she whips her practical slaves. But what's more insidious about her cartoonishly exaggerated performance is how black she is. This movie uses Evillene and her black features and her blackness in a very derogatory way. She is one of the darkest characters that we see in the entire movie, and she's also one of the few characters that we see with prominent Afrocentric features. And I hate how much blackness is used as a degradation tool in the Evillene scenes, because like I said, she looks like this. And while I was researching for this video, someone made a good point that this lady is supposed to look similar to Dorothy's Aunt M, kind of like how in the OG MGM version the evil witch looks like the evil lady that was harassing Toto. This makes me think that there was a lot of deliberate choices here, a lot of anti-black, futurist, and borderline colorist decisions that were prominent in the last act of this movie. Because like I said, many of her sweatshop workers are forced to wear these cartoonishly contorted costumes, right? But if you really look at these characters, you can see the prominence of these Afrocentric features, the dark skin of the skin suit, the Afrocentric nose and lips of these skin suits. The same way we see with these flying monkeys, we don't really get to see such prominent black features unless they're being used as some type of antagonistic caricature. I have to remind you that this is what the Tin Man's oppressive wife looks like. Now our main antagonist of the movie, Evillene, looks like this, as well as her henchmen as seen as her slaves in the sweatshops, as well as the flying monkeys. The movie uses prominent black features as an allegory or direct visualization of suffering and or evilness. Is actually a mess. And don't even get me started on Evillene's prominent use of AAVE when she sings her song No Bad News. Everything together is not looking too good in terms of what they're trying to say here about evil and its inherent relation to blackness. This is even made worse when we compare Evillene, our alphabet standard, right, to her good counterpart, Glinda the Good Witch. So in my first section, I talked about the dichotomy of the evil witch and how she represents a perverse femininity, like bad woman, nasty woman, as Trump would say, versus Glinda, who's like the epitome of perfect femininity, who, I'm not gonna lie, in the MGM version, Glinda is passive as hell. So then we go to the Wiz. We see Evillene. Jump scare.
Yeah, no, it is a jump scare.
But then you put Evillene side by side by our good witch in this movie. I'm not gonna hold you. This woman was so pale. This woman was so pale. When I was watching it with my friends, they were like, who's this white woman? And I said, guys, not too much on her because she was a civil rights leader.
No, she was. Like, she actually was. She was a real nigga.
But the specific choice to make Evillene into whatever the hell that was, I hate to be that person. I'm a black woman and I'm filming this in Women's History Month. Y'all gonna have to let me slide. Y'all gonna find somebody a little darker?
Yeah.
And you know, Hero, I know they realized that they was doing a colorism because when they did the NBC version, they made sure to make the good witch also dark. So
see, you was shitting on the NBC version, but they did some things that made, they made some changes
they
that
had
were,
to, Hero.
still. I mean, yeah, they had to, but that in turn makes the Wiz, that adaptation of the Wiz still, I think, ingestible at least.
I had to give them their props, okay? But damn.
Yeah, give them their flowers for not being as colorist, like, what I mean? No. And it's so funny because I'm blanking on the actress's name, but yeah, she was actually a prominent civil rights actress.
I had to Google it because I was like, who is the white woman who played Glinda Good?
No, legit, finding, realizing that she's mixed. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Why, you're the lightest person in this movie. And she still did a good job in her role or whatever. But the colorism still kind of displays, even if this is super black, super African, super Afrocentric movie, it still has its not even growing pains at this point. It's just kind of like, damn, you had Evillene looking like that. Meanwhile, you chose the fair skinned, Yeah, no, it's a little growing pains. I don't even want to say growing pains.
These are regular pains, Hero.
This is just regular pains. Right. Because, like, you know, we're still dealing with a lot of that stuff now. It's just, you see it back then and you're like, huh, like, you know, you guys have really been moving like this for a long time. Yeah, no. Yeah, no. When I first seen her on the screen, I remember being like, wow,
I screamed.
Is she?
I screamed.
I remember thinking that too. Like, wow, like, there's actually a white person in this movie. Like, no.
It's such an inclusive movie.
No, that's what I said.
Such an
That's what I
inclusive movie.
said. That's what I said.
Everybody. They got everybody in this joint.
But yeah, no, the colorism definitely. It's just something media, unfortunately, even to this day, we still haven't like quite exited the framework of like using darkness, using that to describe evil, and attributing that then to like the way certain characters look and present themselves. Like, I mean, I can just name a whole bunch of characters on my head that are like, you know, darkness embodied, and then be niggas. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
I'd be like, oh, he's evil. He gonna be a 6'5" dreadhead, ain't he?
No, like legit. And I know a couple of, maybe not 6'5", but I know a bunch of dreadheads, and they are some of the sweetest people I know. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, actually, because like I'm telling you guys, it was definitely a deliberate choice to make her look like that, because this is what the actress looks like, and this is what they had Evillene look like. They obviously changed this in the later adaptations of The Wiz. They were going wild in this movie, and I just want to show you guys examples of that. I'm gonna put the version of Evillene that came after The Wiz, and I'm also going to put the NBC version where it was Mary J. Blige, I believe, who played Evillene. But as you can see, they specifically made sure to not do that wild futurism nonsense in portraying their evil character. But what The Wiz did in the 1978 film was definitely a choice. It was definitely a choice. And even though I personally did not like the NBC version of The Wiz, it definitely had a lot of improvements in comparison to the 1978 film, where colorism really wasn't such a prominent, icky part of the film. They decided to have one of my favorite actresses that I found out about from Orange is the New Black as the Good Witch, and they had Mary J. Blige as Evillene. So it really wasn't light skin is the epitome of goodness and dark skin is the epitome of evilness, right? They were just two visibly black women who had their different goals in the movie. The whole entirety of Evillene's sweatshop scene was just colorism and futurism doing numbers on this movie. It actually took me out of the movie several different times because I couldn't forget it. I don't know, it rubbed me all the way wrong, because there was an instant, it mostly surrounds Evillene and all of the bad characters. I don't know, like, to have Michael Jackson and Diana Ross in this movie, and like most of the villainous people have Afrocentric features, always made me say because when you look at the flying monkeys, the fact that they have big lips, big noses, 4C beards, and even the people who are entrapped in the sweatshop, like, I never really noticed, because you know The Wiz was filmed in the olden days, so the camera was low-key given blurry, right?
a couple of those showings, you got to get the HD version to be like, wait a minute, hold on.
Yes, then you look at the faces of the enslaved people, practically, because they working in the sweatshop, right? I don't even know how to describe it to you, Hero, but it's some type of something like dark-skinned amalgamation horror, and I knew that they were doing some type of super colorism, because like how we were talking about in the, what's the song, Brand New Day, right? They strip off the mask, peel off their dark Afrocentric features, in beige little undergarments, and noticeably you go from seeing the entire sweatshop from being dark-skinned people with Afrocentric features to now we doing contour palette. You have dark, you have brown, you have beige. And the way I was able to clock it, I was looking at some of these people and I'm like, your skin color is matching the same shade of this beige underwear. So then I had to pause the movie when I was watching with my friends. I said, what are they trying to say? That liberation, after you're liberated, you strip your Afrocentric features. You strip it.
That's, I mean, that looks bad. That looks bad.
And I'm not gonna hold you. I even think Family Guy, like, there's a Family Guy clip, and I'm gonna put it in.
They did the gag where they
did the gag, right?
They had everybody dressed in that, but they all became black.
And
You
they
know what I
all
mean?
were black, and not like
Yeah.
different like light skinned black people. They were all
It was all
black.
generally around the same skin tone.
So I was watching this with my friend. I'm like, what are they trying to say? You mean to tell me if I stop looking like a Negro, I'm gonna be happy? Talking about some, can you feel a brand new?
Yeah, no. It's something about like this goes even beyond the Wiz, right? Just depicting like evil people or downtrodden people as darker and like
It's like full
in some
Negroes.
stories it's like, I understand what you're going for. You know what I mean? Obviously, if they're like impacted by the sun and are darkened by the sun and are slaves or whatever, like
But
it makes
I
sense.
still
But
have to
just
give them the
some,
side eye.
it's definitely interesting the way that like media will use blackness or even queerness or like disability or whatever to like paint like characters as like more antagonistic or more evil, and like how that like colors their perspective to be more evil or mean or whatever. And unfortunately, the Wiz is not exempt
Sensitive
from
enough,
it.
yeah, insensitive enough to not do that. There's some movies where I expect some nonsense. If it was a Tyler Perry movie, I'd be like, what we expect. If it was
I mean,
a Martin
to
Lawrence,
be fair, Tyler doesn't get that without having something like The Wiz to like act like to have those types of things, set in place, right?
yeah, but it's
To
just
where
that
like you're still depicting darker skinned people that way.
I know they're gonna be like, oh, why didn't she expect this? I mean, Dorothy was a girl with a 4C afro, and she was
Yeah.
visibly, melanated. It wasn't like I had to go to Ancestry.com and find her ancestor. She's visibly like a black woman. So I said,
Mhm.
oh, okay, if this is our main lead, I ain't expect no nonsense like that.
Totally fair. That's totally fair.
But
And
then-
like again, since this is its own thing, like telling its own story low key, like at this point, if you've only ever seen The Wizard of Oz and you're seeing this, you're like, okay, this is gonna be the black version. And
definitely was.
unfortunately, yeah.
It definitely was. Like, the black community has a huge colorism is huge. So how Dorothy is able to defeat Evillene is that she uses the fire extinguisher that they have never used, because Evillene obviously doesn't care about safety for her workers. And as soon as the water touches Evillene, she decides to melt, and Dorothy then flushes her down the toilet. Like, they literally flush her down a toilet. And between the Tin Man being put down by a dark-skinned, visibly fat black woman and Dorothy flushing a visibly black woman down the toilet, I had to look at this movie all types of sideways. But what was the final nail in the coffin for me is that when all of the workers are free because Evillene is dead, they strip their skin suits that were definitely Afrocentric and they become liberated in the song Brand New Day. And as I was watching the scene, I was like, hey, you guys all visibly stopped being dark skinned. Obviously we see a couple dark skinned people lingering amongst the masses, but now you guys start to notice that the pigmentation of these sweatshop workers definitely increases to be lighter. How I was able to peep that is that a lot of the beige underwear that they wore for modesty, a lot of people were noticeably that same beige color. And in my head, I was like, what is this movie trying to say? You have to be less visibly black in order to feel liberation? Because it was quite noticeable from them going to these skin suits to you start seeing beige colors. It went from like a bronzer to a bronzer contour and highlight palette. Like I was visibly confused. And like I said in Act 1, the way that all of the different World of Oz movies treat the evil witch in comparison to the fraud that is the wizard has always rubbed me as extremely misogynistic. IDK, that whole entire Evillene sweatshop scene was very icky for me, and the ickiness that I started feeling towards this movie was only exemplified when we got back to the Emerald City. So like I said in Act 1, I always felt extremely uncomfortable with how different versions of the Wizard of Oz has treated the Wicked Witch in comparison to the wizard. Like, yes, Evillene, Elphaba, all of these characters are evil, right? But the way that they are treated in comparison to the wizard, who in almost all iterations of this movie sends a little girl to defeat such great evil when he definitely had the rights and power to, have always screamed misogyny to me. So when our Dorothy comes back to the Emerald City, she sees that the Wiz was not this great powerful creature that he was telling the Emerald City that he was. He's literally just a guy. Like, he's not even Ken. He's worse than Ken. He's just a guy. And as Dorothy is laying into him, crying and whining about how he was a failed politician that used to be a dog walker, this, that, and the fourth, and Dorothy and her friends are looking like, we almost died, literally almost died, trying to do this one task that you sent us out to do. And he's like, well, I couldn't do it because if I would have went to see Evillene, she would have noticed I was a fraud and killed me. You are literally the owner and the ruler of one of the most capitalistic, richest cities raised in all of Oz. Don't play in my face. He's literally just making an excuse, and Dorothy is so mad. Cool little parallel that I realized between the Wicked movie as well as The Wiz is that both versions of the wizard have some type of antagonistic role in relation to animals. Our wizard from the Wicked movie is somebody who is literally trying to get rid of talking animals and make them a subjugated class, versus the wizard in The Wiz was a dog catcher turned into a leader of a powerful city. I just wanted to point that out. And so as the wizard is literally begging Dorothy to keep his secret, Dorothy is not having it. And something that I wanted to point out culturally is that this is the line that Kendrick decided to feature in one of his a million diss tracks that he had about Drake. Oh, I'm a phony, I've known it all along. That was the little thing that Kendrick referenced when dissing Drake. Going to show you once again that The Wiz, even though people hated it when it came out, is still a major cultural juggernaut. But let's head back into this movie. While everybody is upset that they were bamboozled by The Wiz, Dorothy decides to look around at all of the friends he made along the way that stood beside her despite all of the challenges, and tells them that the thing that they were looking for all along was within them the whole time. The Tin Man talked about how he had no hearts, but he shed tears at thinking that Dorothy and the Cowardly Lion was dead. The lion thought that he had no courage, but he was the main one that saved them from being beat up by the subway station. And the Scarecrow thought that he didn't have brains, but he was the smartest amongst them. And as everybody is looking and realizing, yes, you're right, Dorothy, the one thing that Dorothy wanted in her heart of hearts was to go home, she realized she couldn't get. And this is where Glinda shows up to be like, you have the possibility of going home yourself. And I'm telling you, it was such a jump scare to see all of these like darker skinned individuals and to see this paler individual, but thought he was a civil rights leader, so I can't say too much of my sense. Like, she was literally fighting for our rights. And so one of the things that I really took away from this movie was the importance of liberation. Dorothy decided to refuse the wizards with all of his manipulation and false promises, and decided that the best way to get to liberation is by looking inward and looking towards the community that you built. All of the friends that Dorothy made along the way were integral in helping her defeat Evillene and liberating so many people across the world of Oz. Something that the wizard in all his great alleged power could never imagine doing by himself, because he was more focused on maintaining power and gaining power than caring about those who needed his help the most. And while there are many issues that I had with The Wiz, specifically in relation to black women, colorism, and futurism, I still feel like the overall message about loving yourself, finding power within yourself, and not falling prey to all of the systematic pressures that we have, obviously in America, right? And obviously in Brooklyn, as where the obvious themes of this urban fantasy come from, are still long lasting. They said The Wiz was a box failure flop, which is April 18, 2025, is still a major cultural juggernaut. It did not go the way of the dinosaurs and fade into non-existence, but it still maintains its popular cultural relevance. But all of the points that you're making about community are like so real. When Diana Ross sang Home and practically sang about how she just appreciates everything that she really wasn't appreciating in the beginning of the movie, because in the beginning of the movie we literally start with a black family banquet, versus when we start the OG MGM version, Dorothy's like, I don't want to work on the farm, you can't make me. Like, sis, you're on a farm, you gotta do farm work if you want to live on the farm. So the dichotomy between those scenes to me were really exemplify the black experience versus the white experience. Black people, especially Africans such as us, right? We are so communal in nature. Dorothy and the Wiz having to figure out her community and practically having to grow up. I just felt it.
Yeah, because the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, community is amazing.
Yeah.
But we still have flaws in community. People need movies like those that center communal joy. Movies that tell you that there's avenues or ways to still have fun, find community, be a black person in an oppressive environment. That's what I was trying to say, I think.
But what do you think that we can learn, like, in our year of 2025 from The Wiz?
You know, it's funny, I just saw Sinners. While they're not very similar in terms of like plot and theme, they are similar in terms of like the awesome things that happen when you give black auteurs the resources, given access to the machines and the tools that, you know, Empire has built. Now it's important to like think about the spoils of Empire in the middle of it, but you don't have to the whole time. You enjoy that. You enjoy the thing. You enjoy the art. Diana Ross and Michael Jackson being in one movie is like Beyonce and Kendrick doing a movie right now. It's this ridiculous cultural touchstone. And it kind of like speaks to this, I don't know if I want to use the word resilience, that's the best word I can think of, where this film that didn't do well in the box office, but was so iconic that the culture has just carried it into being probably 10 times worth what it was spent to make, because we loved it so much, because we love our art so much, because we show up for each other, because generally speaking we take care of our icons even when our icons don't always take care of us, because it's not even like about them. Like the icons are just a vessel through which the beauty that is kind of in us just carries on again. And so like when the icons fail us, it's like, that's okay, because the thing that you're giving us wasn't yours to begin with. It belonged to the essence of the culture, which is why we love it so much. We appreciate you bringing it to us. You know, I think Diana Ross ran off to Paris, married a white man, didn't talk to nobody after that, something like that.
Michael was very sad.
Right.
Michael was very sad. Yeah, that I heard of. That I heard of.
You know, so if that's the case, hey, that's fine. We'll take. I'm gonna come in now. Like we still got it. You gave us what you needed to give. There's so much to that. And then of course you got into like the underlying political discourse, the haves and the have-nots, you know, and shout out to the original creators of The Wizard of Oz. I just watched something from somebody else about that, was just talking about how the original creator of The Wizard of Oz, it was kind of a progressive counterculture thing that he made. It was, for him, it was low-key critiquing religiosity in America at the time, because, you know, we have this grand wizard, we have this grand entity that we give all this credit to, and like when you peek behind the curtain, you're like, I don't know if you're really doing anything, and what does that mean to have so many people believe in this thing and have it be false? You translate that to Black people, is that God? Is that capitalism? Is that the upper mobility of the people? There's so much to chew on in the movie, you know, and that's just beautiful.
Like I said, Kendrick himself, the man who hosted this year's Super Bowl, referenced The Wiz in his diss towards Drake, another well-known Black artist, right? It isn't just stars like Kendrick that are paying homage to The Wiz, right? We see artists like Cynthia Erivo, who played Elphaba in this year's adaptation of Wicked, giving The Wiz props by singing the song Home. And it isn't just the older generations. I was literally just on TikTok and I saw people making The Wiz characters in Dress to Impress. So The Wiz is still a culture juggernaut. And one thing that I want to definitely end on is that even Family Guy got the brand new day liberation thing better than The Wiz. I hate to be this messy, but this is my channel and this is like a 2-hour video. But how did Family Guy do this liberation thing better than The Wiz?
Story on everyone's mind continues to be the absence of police officers in Quahog. Sir, as a citizen, how has this affected you?
The police are gone? Oh my god, we're finally safe!
Because you see how everybody is a visibly Black person with Afrocentric features and they not mocking it? I'm not gonna say too much. But yes, The Wiz is a cultural juggernaut. And I just feel like we as Black people love The Wizard of Oz so much. And having The Wiz as proof of that is so powerful. Thank you guys so much for watching until the end of this video. When I tell you this passion project was literally months in the making, I'm not joking. A 2-hour Baka video essay. Y'all not getting nothing like this from me again. But thank you guys so much for the support. Thank you so much to the Patreons who are funding this project. Oh my gosh, this video took forever. And thank you guys so much for watching until the end, engaging with me in the comments, liking, subscribing, and the next time I see you guys, we're gonna be in the magical world of Oz. Bye.